Okay, this is conversation 6 of the coronavirus series, the next 6 months. I have called this intentionally a conversation series. You're not going to see any slides today. What I have been doing, I think since we initially started, is I have done some pre-work, and then I make some comments about that pre-work as we go through this conversation. It is a training, I guess, in the sense that you hopefully will learn something. Those of you that are more advanced in this will learn less than those of you that are just starting out, but it's not really what I would consider a pure training that I typically lead. I do have a class. Ooh, do I have that signed up? I do have a class coming up that is going to be what I would consider more of a training, but this is more of a conversation. The WOW box information that is still in that coronavirus series the next 6 months, I would say is current. However, I don't say that anything prior to that probably is. When I started this, it was in late March. There's been a ton of changes that have happened in virtual galas since then. So although what I provided early on is great information at the time, it's probably not something I would waste your time looking too much at. I'd focus working on backwards, not start at the beginning. I'd start here and then go backwards if you've got time to learn. Today, post your questions in chat, please. And ideally post those questions when I'm talking about something that's relevant to what you have an inquiry about. And to that end, let me give you the flow so that you know when your question might make the most sense. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about the videos and the types of galas. So ideally, you've had a chance to watch those. I know that they were posted very early this morning and late last night, but hopefully you've had a chance. It'll take you about, well, I added it up. It's going to take you 66 minutes. That's what it's going to take you, just over an hour. And we're going to talk then about how to select, like if you're trying to decide a virtual gala format for you, we're going to talk about which is how to figure out what might be best for you. And then I'm going to just share a random list of what I've learned. Maybe some of them are do differentlies. Others are things that worked well, but at any rate, it's stuff that I have made a mental note to put forth when I'm visiting with clients about virtual galas. Types of galas. So we're starting out here with types of galas. Two-screen solution is the first one that we're talking about here. And a two-screen solution is what the initial virtual galas were all about. They would put people up in front of the camera. Set would be behind them, some sort of a set, might be a professional, might be something like this. And they would say, hey, friends, we need you to go bid on your phone. So for those of you that had been using mobile bidding devices or mobile bidding software in prior years, it's not that much of a change. Yeah, the broadcast is different, but you're still telling people to bid on their phones or to donate on their phones. That is what we mean by a two-screen solution. They're watching the live stream on the largest screen in their home, laptop, computer, plugged into a TV, who knows? And then they're bidding on their other device, tablet, phone, whatever the case might be, two-screen solution. You cannot run a real live auction in that environment because there are tremendous delays. Up to 25 seconds. You can imagine how awkward that can be if I'm asking for a bid of $100 and you don't hear it for 25 seconds. And then by the time you respond, the return is slow as well. So it just doesn't work in that way, which is why in those videos that you saw, everything was directed offline. So I'm talking about the item. I'm talking about the item. I'm talking about the item. And I'm like, it's closing in 2 minutes. I'm talking about the item. It's closing in a minute. And we're pushing people to bid offline or on their phone because we don't really know what that time delay is. That is the two-screen solution. You saw Martha's Vineyard Community Service. Everybody was in their respective homes to do that, with the exception of the two MCs, and they went to a community theater. That was the first community community television station. That was the second community television station that I've seen used in this capacity. Another one was up in Naperville, Illinois area. And the rest of us were all from our respective homes. And so the broadcast software that was used was run a professional company who does very large scale events, did that. Everybody was patched in. I could not hear what was going on in the studio. More or less, I would hear something in my ear saying, okay, Sherry, and go. And that was how I managed it. We found in the practice run in working with Seth Meyers the day before is that Seth might want to say something. And, let's be real. People don't want to hear from me. They want to hear from Seth Meyers. So if Seth wants to say something, I'm going to give him the stage. But I didn't want to be in a situation where I was just talking, and I didn't know that Seth wanted to say anything. I can't hear him. How do I know that he wants to speak? I can't see him. Well, that's what they fixed, is the broadcast company decided that if they put a floating picture of Seth on my screen, then I would know he wants to speak. So I'd be talking, and all of a sudden I see Seth floating on my screen and I'm like, oh, Seth. And I know he wants to cut in. So all of that was managed by the broadcast company. It's not inexpensive to do something like that, but it worked really well for that organization. And, kudos to them. They'd been trying to get Seth to work with them for several years. And lo and behold, he said yes the year that coronavirus came. The second video that you watched was Hope for Henry. That was in a makeshift studio. It was their nonprofit headquarters. Very tiny space for the most part. I mean, the offices aren't bad, but by the time you put all of that equipment in there, it gets to be darn small. And so we had a single stage. We're all walking in and out, just managing that single stage, and the event worked. I mean, it was perfectly fine for what it was. But if you are looking for something a bit more glamorous, you're probably going to need to go to a studio and have more space in order to spread out. So that event had a really nice, they did a lot of work in advance. They had watch parties. So they did have some pods that got together to view that. The sales that they had in advance were that you would buy a table of 10 or 8, I think it was 6 or 8, 6 or 10, something like that. I'd have to go back and look. And you could either buy the meal from a Michelin rated restaurant and get a wine pairing with it, or you could get gourmet pizza and get a beer tasting with that. So people were getting together, in their pods, watching the show. I'm going to talk more about watch parties later, but suffice to say, for this organization, it was a good fit. The third one was PRS. That was held in a professional studio. The primary reason I wanted you to see that one was because they've got this thermometer, and people are really interested in having thermometers. They seem to be. I'm going to talk more about this in my comments and what I've learned, but that was why I wanted you to see it. What is it great? What it's great about studio events, these 2-screen solution events and so forth, is that the finished product looks great. Because it is great. They've got high-end equipment. They're working with a company that's managing all of this for them. It's slick. And that's what you're going to see on YouTube. If any of you find a complete Zoom event on YouTube, please share it with me, because I don't think anybody is putting their Zoom-based events out on YouTube. It doesn't look as slick. But if you are wanting something that has higher production value, that's great. The other thing I like about these events, for an auctioneer, for me, what I like about these events, very often, not always, but very often, there will be a teleprompter as part of this. And honestly, folks, if you read music, or if you're a good reader, you're not going to have a problem adapting to a teleprompter. Now, if you're super great in math or science and reading was never your strong point, maybe you will. But I think telepromptering is pretty easy. And because I don't have to learn anything, I don't really have to know it. I just have to read it. So for me, it's a lot easier to be able to use a teleprompter when it's available. So if I just show up and look pretty, so to speak, be enthusiastic, it's an easier job for me personally. So if you've got people that you're going to be putting in front of that teleprompter, maybe you've got MCs that you've worked with over time and you just know that they would adapt well, that might be a good solution for you, because they'll be fine with it. I really think, again, if you're a good reader or you read music, I think you'll be fine with that. What I don't like about it, it's expensive. It's not realistic for many. One of the early events that I did was for a school here in DC. They got a quote for a production that was something that they'd seen online from another group, $14,850. They sent it to me, so I've got it here. Almost $15,000 to do the event. What they changed to was a solution on Zoom for $4,500. Big difference there in value. One other thing I don't like about the studio events is I just find it a little challenging if you've got two screens going on. You're telling people to watch the show here and then go here. It can be a little bit confusing. So from that standpoint, it's just another layer of complexity. Pre-recorded. Talking about pre-recorded. So again, any comments on studio, now would be a time to throw those in. If you've got questions or comments, I'll keep an eye over here in the chat. I'll keep my eyes over there as we go through to pre-recorded. So pre-recorded, this was the CARE Coalition group. They have got they work with these people in detention centers to get them out of that. Elizabeth is asking the best time in the evening to do a video in relation to the event. Any comments on how long, short it should be? Best time in the evening to do a video. Elizabeth, are you referring to a fun to need video? I don't know what you mean. I can answer the question once I know what you mean. But otherwise, we use videos throughout the events, depending on what the question or what the video is about. Pre-recording a live auction preview. I think that's great. Yes, Amy, I've done some of those for some of my clients, and then they send that out in the days beforehand. I think it's good. Don Marie says, please make sure your comments are directed to everyone and not just Sherry. Oh, yeah, make sure that drop down says all panelists and attendees, please. All attendees and panelists, please. If you don't put it on Zoom, how do you suggest the gala goes out to your viewers? Well, you mean post-event, because of course they'll be participating in the live event. So if it's post-event, you're going to have to do some pretty editing, and it's going to be kind of tricky with Zoom, honestly. The thing about Zoom is that, you know, it looks like this. I'm in the screen, right? We're looking at the camera right here. It's not as elegant as me standing back, you know, in a nice studio and talking in this way. It just has a different feel. There's advantages to it. I can be more interactive with the camera, right? I can look for those $100 bids in there if I need to look for a $100 bid, but it's also a little bit more homegrown. How do you find a studio? What keywords do you use to search? Jennifer, I would ask around in doing that. Jennifer, you're in the DC area. I can give you some names. How do you feel about pre-recorded to make it look like it was a live event? Heidi, it's difficult. We'll talk about that in a second when I go to pre-recordings. Diane says, I love the way you say hit the donate button so many times. Yeah, that's one thing you do a lot in these events is repeat. Curious if anyone has used Qtego and it's live streaming. Okay. Has Zoom improved the number of connections available for the event? How many do you suggest? We'll talk about that later or bring it up later. Maybe a good way to support public television. Sure, Amy, I'm game for that. All right. We're going to keep talking about pre-recorded events, and then we're talking about Zoom events. So for those of you with Zoom questions, we'll get to it. The CARE Coalition group was primarily an awards ceremony. In fact, I didn't start working with this group until last year. I come in, I do a fund to need. Most of that event is all about awards. So I don't have a lot of experience with them. They're a new client this year. Obviously, they transitioned into a virtual format. They had me, the original plan was that I was going to be live, and they were also going to have the interview live. And then as we got it further into it, because I knew I was going to be in my house, they didn't have a studio anywhere. Some of the software and the technology challenges with that meant it just wasn't going to happen. We were looking at text to bid. We were looking at some software platforms. Finally, literally like 4 days before the event, they're like, Sherry, nope, we're not going to do it. You're going to be recorded like 90% of the show. So at that point, I did the recordings, I sent them over to them, and then they dropped them in. Now, is the big thing that production companies, the reason production companies love videos, one of the reasons anyway, is that it's all timed. It's all controlled. You don't have any of these weird things that happen, like people can't hear, the audio goes out, there's a storm and the connection falls apart. It's controllable. And so I understand that, I do. But of course, it's not live, it's not interactive, and there is an added, you showed up today, there's going to be a recording put out. Why do people show up to live events? Why do they show up to concerts? There's just a different experience associated with that. Wouldn't you know that live piece that they had, that interview that they had with the 2 award winners, That was what caused them grief in the end, because I don't know if there was a vote that day. I don't remember what it was, but whatever time they were going to have that interview, it got shifted. And so then suddenly 24 hours before the event, they're changing all of the way the videos are structured, because they have to make sure that they hit whatever 7:30 in the evening or 7 o'clock or 8:40. I don't remember what it was, in order to do that interview. And I thought, well, that's a good reason why production companies don't like live. Things change, and you got to, and particularly when you're working with some the people up here, the politicians, they're doing multiple events a night sometimes. So from that standpoint, it can be really difficult. So what I liked about it, I liked that awards were efficiently handed out and that the award winners spoke succinctly. When we're doing that at the in-person event, right? People kind of come up, it takes time. They get off the stage, they get on the stage. Here, it's just like boom, boom, boom. Those videos are all lined up. I also liked that it was, oh, that's a non-like. What I did not like about it was that there was a loss of control with interactivity. We just didn't have that interaction that I feel is important for events. And I did not like that we cannot acknowledge donors as they donate. In this case, I'm encouraging people and I'm crossing my fingers and hoping that they donate. And what I tried to do, and this was one of the comments over here, is that I feel like there is really and it's important to say people's names and thank them. So when I did the pre-recorded segments for Care Coalition, I tried to make it feel live, but it wasn't live, but I just feel like that might help other people feel like they want to donate. The other third one, now this is where we get into our web meeting style events: Zoom, Google, maybe a webinar format. Instead of web meeting, it's a webinar, Demio, Livestorm. I've worked with several of these applications. So that's the NAMA Foundation. If you have not had a chance to watch any of the homework and pre-work rather, and you are looking for something different, I'd encourage you to watch that Zoom event in the conversation portal, because that's the one that's just harder to find on YouTube. You just don't see a lot of that. And boy, I had to go through blurring out names and all of this stuff. It took a lot of time to make that happen. So from that standpoint, if you just have a short amount of time, I would watch that one. I put a longer period of time there on the pre-show than what I did for any of the other events that were pre-recorded there. And I did that because I wanted you to see feel the interactivity that was taking place before the show even began. People are conversing, they unmuted, I've had that happen a couple of times, but it still surprises me. People unmute and they start talking and they're engaged. The music is happening. We still had nice transitions to videos, and you'll notice in there as well that we can do side by side. And here's what the big question is going to be for some of you, is like, wait a second, how do you do all of this? Guys, it's not really Zoom. Yes, people are logging into Zoom, but the fact is that your production company behind the scenes is managing this through a mixer, right? There's different types of mixers. vMix seems to be the one that most people use, most of the professionals use. Some people, I had one client use a broadcasting system, OBS, but when you're mixing this, the show on screen looks a little bit different, although people are, yes, logging in through Zoom. And if Zoom crashes, your gala crashes with it. So there is that element of it. That is what I'm leading the class in, is on this is Zoom. And I'm just seeing some people have typed in. Let me just go through here and see what. So Meredith is asking about, when do you end these auctions? It's been all over the map, Meredith, but generally what I advise is open it up a few days early and close it later that night of the gala or a day or two later. It kind of depends on the night that you're doing it. Like if you're doing it on a Friday night, you might close it on a Sunday evening, but it really depends on your event. But it's all over the map for that. I like it open a few days before and prefer a day or two after. Hey, Nick, nice to see you. Nick and I took a course together early on virtual events. Nick, there's one other person on this series right now that I know is technical. You might be too technical, even by what you're saying here, hybrid platforms. I'll talk about hybrid here, or what I view as hybrid, in a second. Angela says we do Facebook Live. The software is Studio Switcher. Okay, there's another one. Sounds like a mixing type software. Very good. Facebook Live, the big things I've heard about, the complaints I've heard about Facebook Live, and I haven't done any event that's strictly Facebook Live, is the delays, tremendous delays with Facebook Live. Melinda did a pre-recorded event. It worked with a videographer to record it. It was saved to Vimeo. We put the link out, told guests to tune in, but in reality, of course, they didn't really need to. Yep, that's a pre-recorded event. The recording can still be seen. Yeah, we acknowledge sponsors. Yeah, I've seen some very nicely done pre-recorded events. I have. There was one that somebody sent me that was kind of a Mr. Rogers theme. It was cute. I think it was out of Minnesota. Can you recommend production companies? Kathy, are you local? I don't know if, I mean, I can recommend some in the DC area, but I don't know everything nationwide. Pete says on Facebook Live, latency is 60 seconds. Pete, Nick, meet one another. You're both techies. Katie says, what are your set amounts during fund and need versus a general ask? Okay, so Katie's asking about how do you manage this? You're asking people for money. Should you have levels? Should you not have levels? Depends on the style of event that you're going to use. So some of the events that we did, like that PRS one, I went through the levels. I should say we, because I actually had a co-host there. And so he was talking, I'd kind of pitch it back and forth. So we went through the various levels and we talked about what that level could do. But then at Gonzaga, which is not a video that I shared, it may be out there on YouTube, I don't recall, but Gonzaga on December, it was a free for all. You know, money was just coming in and we were acknowledging people and thanking people. And it's just what you like to do. Now, I will say personally, I think it's nice to be able to have some touch points for people to know what the value of their gift is. $1,000 does this. $1,500 will do that. $10,000. Wow. Look at what you can do with that. That's my take on it. Holly sees Holly Lee. Hey, Holly. She's out of Indianapolis area. It's not Carmel. It's Carmel. How long are these events lasting? Holly, oh my gosh. I have to tell you, I've had 45 minutes, like the Hope for Henry was supposed to be 45 minutes. It went to an hour. It was no big deal. It flowed well. The Zoom events are more like 2 hours and still people aren't complaining. So I don't want to hear any of this like, oh my gosh, it's too long. You know what? You keep it interactive. You keep it fun. People will pay attention. I'm telling you, God, on these live auctions, it's driving me crazy because in an in-person event, normally we say it takes 4 minutes to sell an item. I'm taking 5 and sometimes 6 minutes on a Zoom event to sell a live auction item. It drives me. And afterwards, I'll talk to the client. I'll say, what do you think? Oh, it's fine. No, it was okay. So I'm over that. It takes longer, but as long as it's fun, people stick around. Have you seen any opposition from people using chat for a live auction? No, I have not. Michelle says, with fund and need levels, you didn't close the levels, right? All levels are open all the time. For a studio event, well, technically, you're right. Yeah, even for a Zoom event, because I might be at the $500 level and people are putting in 1,000. Doesn't happen often. The Zoom events tend to be more structured, but it could happen. So yeah, theoretically, people can give whenever they want to give, especially at the studio level. Monica says the levels were very helpful for our event. I don't remember now. Monica that might have been the first time they did a fund to need in that way. Kim said, what platform do you recommend for lifetime bidding for a fund to need while integrated into a live virtual gala? Kim, I don't give recommendations on software, not in this kind of a platform. I might for clients to a degree, but not in this kind of a platform. However, I won't leave you hanging. There are like 40 companies now that are offering different solutions for software. If you do a search on Red Apple Auctions list of, I think, mobile bidding vendors, it'll come up. So there's lots of resources there and different price points. Help is free. I'm giving help. Somebody used Octria. Yeah, I'm familiar with that. I've recommended them in the past too. Okay, let's keep talking. One screen solution is next. Last one that I put on the screen for you to watch a video of. I haven't done one of these yet. I will be doing 1 or 2 of these in the springtime. So I don't have a video to show you other than pulling from another auctioneer. So his name, I forgot it, Doug. Doug? Is it Doug? I'm blanking out on his name. He's down in Texas, and he's a big proponent of Qtego. In fact, his company like runs the in-house events when people use Qtego. And what people like about this is that it's so easy. Instead of a 2 screens, remember, bidding here, watching here, instead of that, everybody is able to just see the whole show on the screen, and they're able to bid and see the chat, maybe depending on where the chat is, and they're able to see the slides. It's easy. But I am afraid I'm not going to like it. That's my fear. Now, I have seen some auctioneers and talked to some auctioneers who have said, "Oh, Sherry, it's great. It's really fun." But I think they do events differently than me. That's what I fear. What I don't like about the one screen solution, and I mentioned this in the video, is that it feels very commercial to me. Oh, friends, we got the next item here. What is it? Let's roll it and sell it out. And I just feel like that is too commodity based. We are not in this game to sell items. People just don't care. No offense, but people don't really care about your items. There are some people who want to get something for the donation that they make, hence the auction. There are other people who are just fine giving a donation, hence the fund a need. The one screen solution, I haven't worked with it yet, but appears to me to make it a commodity based auction, which is not what is great for fundraising. Now, this one of the software solutions that I am going to be working with here, I had a demo with them because I needed to kind of get up to speed. They're changing their solutions all the time and doing upgrades with virtual now being the only way to do an event. And so I had talked to him, and we realized I'm still going to have to go into the studio. I was thinking maybe I could work from my home and do the software, use the software and be able to implement it that way. But it's going to be a lot easier for me to go into the studio. So I'm still have to go to the studio, but they're going to be doing a one screen solution there. So I look forward to trying it out, and I'll let you know how it goes. And then the other solution, the type of virtual gala that's come out, but I haven't done any of these either, although I know on the West Coast, they're a little bit ahead of the rest of the country when it comes to these virtual galas because they got coronavirus first. So they had to adapt first, and they're really techie out there anyway. So they're pretty good about making changes. They have been doing these hybrid events. They might go to a drive-in movie theater. I don't even know of a drive-in movie theater in Washington, D.C. If I want a drive-in movie theater, I have to go back home to rural Kansas, and Canopolis, which has maybe a population of 300 people, had the drive-in movie theater. That's where we would go for our drive-in movies. I have no idea where I'd go for a drive-in movie theater here in DC. Maybe they exist. Some of you locals would be able to tell me that. But that's where a lot of them are taking place. But then there's also this idea that you gather people in groups, a small group in the audience. There was a talk in late 2020. One of my clients in upstate New York was trying to do something that bring 50 people together and then broadcast it out to others. I mentioned this in one of the earlier conversations I have. My fear is going to be that we're just not going to do a good job of these events. The reason being is that when I'm focused on you, I'm looking at the camera and I'm focused on you, and I'm interacting with you as best I can through that camera. But if I have someone in front of me, it's kind of like having a dog that's barking or a toddler that needs attention. Your focus is immediately going to go to who's in front of you and who's in the room. And I would feel almost like I'm treating the audience rudely if I'm spending a lot of time looking in the camera. So my fear is that the hybrid events, until we come up with a really good way to do it, it's going to be very passive for those that are watching from home and great for those that are in the crowd. I will see where things go with that, but that I haven't done one yet. I'm sure that by late 2021, my guess would be that I'll start to do some of those. I hope that we do them well when we do them. We are, so just looking here, Hagerstown. Okay, thank you, Judy. Hagerstown, Maryland has a drive-in movie theater. Jennifer's telling me Winchester. Okay, see, I've got some long-time folks from the DC metro area here who are giving me advice. Oh, yeah, Lisa. Why do some organizations choose not to offer a fund a need? But don't you think that especially odd during these times? Shouldn't we embrace every opportunity? Okay, let me give you an example. There is a hospital that I worked with for 6 years now. And they refused to do a fund to need. And it was kind of a running joke. Every year we'd do our wrap up meeting, and I would say, well, you know what? My biggest advice to you is I think we should do a fund to need. And she'd say, nope, we're not going to do a fund to need. And for them, it was tied to, they had a longstanding capital campaign. And because they were pushing so much on the capital campaign, they just didn't want the idea of having a fund to need. They felt that it was competing. And so it was no, 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 no. But when the capital campaign is done, Sherry, we'll talk about it. We'll see. During that 5-6 year period in 2019, she saw a fund to need done at a other organization in her community, and they raised a lot of money. And she said that was when kind of the tide turned as well, that she was like, maybe we should do this. So 2020 came and they didn't have their event. We'll see what happens in 2021 if we're able to have that event, whether they do a fund to need. So that, to make a short story long, capital campaigns seem to be the one reason why people don't want to do a fund to need. And yes, I agree. We should be looking at ways to embrace different types of ways to gather money in 2020, 2021 and beyond. And I also think that the Fund to Need offers a unique opportunity to share mission. And one of the things that I've also heard about virtual galas, one of my clients said, I didn't even mention this on my notes here in a bit, but it's worth sharing, is that they feel they've had more comments from people saying, oh, I didn't know you offered that program, or I didn't realize the nonprofit did this. And I don't even remember who the client was, but she said that they share this information every year. But yet this year, I guess because people were watching a screen, it settled into their mind differently, and they recognized more of what the nonprofit did. They became more educated because of the virtual gala format. So in that sense, yeah, fund to needs are important, and I'm a fan of them, but not everybody does them. I see more often now people doing fund to needs and not live auctions is kind of what I see more often right now. Cheryl, why not the fund to need in the capital campaign? People have their reasons, they feel like it's just competing somehow. They're already asking people for big gifts. They don't want to sit there in the fund to need and ask for 5,000 when they're asking somebody for a $5,000 gift in the capital campaign. It's all over the map. But that's one of the most current ones that I can give you. Other people just feel, you know what? Here's another thing. Actually, I heard this earlier on in my career than I hear it now. But the other thing is that, and I'm thinking specifically of one organization, they had never done a fund to need because it felt icky. It felt icky. And one of the development director or associate, whatever she was, she had seen a fund to need that I had done, and it didn't feel icky to her. So it was okay then to bring it into their organization if I showed them how to do it, because then it wasn't icky. How's that for technical terminology? All right, those are the comments about then the types of events that we've got. The two-screen solution, the pre-recorded, the web style events, Zoom, webinar, whatever, meeting, whatever the case might be. Our one-screen solution, which is coming out, and our hybrids, which we have yet to really master. Now I want to talk about how do you choose which virtual gala format you should use. Danielle, how long should these events last? I did talk about that. You can catch it in the recording. But generally speaking, it's 45 minutes to 2 hours. How to choose a system. For many people, your budget is going to dictate what system, what format you go with. You got a high-end event, you might say, hey, it's studio. We want that kind of gloss and glam. But if you are down and dirty and looking for something just to get her done, you might be using a webinar, running it in-house. And I think you can do a good job with either. It just looks differently, but budget is going to dictate for many of you what you're going to do. Technical skills are going to dictate this as well. If you know you're running it in-house, your skill set is going to dictate what you use. So one of my clients, a school client over in Virginia, they have a gal there who runs all of their technology in the school. And so they knew that she was going to run it. They were doing a pretty quick turnaround. They were supposed to have an April event. They pushed it back to May. We did a webinar. That's what we ran. It was a webinar, fun to need only. Live auction was done, as an online auction, but I didn't even talk about items. It was just all done online. And then another group, another school in the spring. I do a lot of school events, tend to do more school events in the spring, more nonprofit events in the fall. And the other school, they've got somebody on their committee. He's very techie. He likes to do technical things. I think has a podcast. So he's just got some skill sets. And so he taught himself OBS, Open Broadcasting System, and they did a studio-based event. They set up a little studio in their school, and it looked very professional. They ran it in-house, but it was still a studio type two-screen solution event. So if you got technical skills, that you'll have different skill advantages than someone who does not. Number 3, do you need the recording for a long time? Are you thinking you're going to edit clips from it and use it in a different way? If so, it might be worth it to upgrade to something that you feel looks professional and represents you well. I have this conversation internally with myself all the time. I could pay a video company to go out and do a really stellar commercial for Red Apple Auctions and put that out and promote it and put it on Facebook and all of that, right? I could make it glossy. Sold, we're sold. The whole energy bit. But on the other hand, me working on Camtasia with my itty-pitty little editing skills am able to pull together a video that seems to work just as well and people are okay with. So would I like to have something glossy representing Red Apple Auctions and looking real slick and have my branded colors? Yeah, I would. Do I want to pay for it and go through that effort? I don't think I do. I haven't yet. Maybe I'll change that in the future. But the same is going to be true for you. For some of you, your branding is really strong. You want it to look a certain way. You want to include clips up on YouTube later. You're going to need to do something a little bit nicer than maybe trying to figure it out on the fly using a webinar format. And then finally, how to choose a system. Who attends your event? Are they chummy? Do they know each other and like to talk? Or is this a national organization and they don't even know who each other is? What kind of a group do you have? If people typically participate, if they like to schmooze and talk and they know each other and they're kind of friends, if you will, you could go with a Zoom meeting because that will enable the most interaction. But if you have 1,000 people or 1,500 people, Zoom meeting starts to become obnoxious. So in that sense, you'd either do a webinar or you just do a studio event and you'd say, well, yeah, they're chummy, but we just got too many of them and that's not going to work. So all of those factors are going to come into play when you're deciding what sort of virtual gala you want to have. Judy is asking about people who bid in the chat. How do they get their payments? So Judy, you still have to have software. It is no different. The Zoom event is no different than when you're doing your in-person event. When I'm doing an in-person event, maybe you do a different style of in-person event, but when I'm doing an in-person event, right? I'm up at the front, I talk about the item and I say sold to bidder 384, right? Sold for $5,000 to bidder 384. The clerk who stands right next to me writes down $5,000, 384. And then that is run to the checkout area and they input it into the software. Bidder 384 paid $5,000 for item number 4. That's how we manage it in an in-person event. Guess what? It's the same for Zoom. You print out the chat and you're like, oh, Sherry Truler, $5,000. She won item number 1. Put it into the software and it's sold. That's how we manage it. So you still need software. You're just billing them in a different way. Dia is asking, hey, Dia, have you had a chance to watch the videos? That would be one of the questions. She's talking about interactivity because the videos have some of that. They talk about, we talked about, there's trivia examples in there, doing trivia. There's examples of wine tastings in there and leading people through that. And also just the very we talk about the Zoom rooms. You'll see an example of that in there. It's just also the very nature of how the engagement is on the screen. If you're just sitting there watching people like this is kind of annoys me about teleprompters. We are delighted to have you with us today. We're excited to be able to support our mission, even though in this unprecedented times. Oh, that annoys me. It just becomes too rote. And I'd rather have a few mistakes and have people looking at a camera, quite honestly. That's my take on it. This feels more interactive than this over here, smiling and reading the teleprompter. It kind of annoys me. In the virtual gala format, Cindy says, do you recommend both silent and live auctions as we've done in the past, or is it better to focus on only one type? Well, Cindy, if you're doing a studio event, it's going to be online auction. Your live is now online. Your silent is now online. That's it, done. If you're doing a one-screen solution, you can do live bidding. And I would say, yeah, go ahead and take advantage of it. You bought the one-screen solution, do an actual live auction. And if you're doing a Zoom event, yeah, do a live auction. I would encourage you to do that. And you can see examples of both of those, all three of those in the videos. Jennifer is asking about a school in California. What should they do? Schools, I'm a big fan of Zoom. Betty says charge for tickets or not. Whoo, boy, that's always a tough decision. If you're going to charge, the bottom dollar has to be super cheap. Because most people are not going to pay to watch a virtual gala, Betty. So it depends on what you're giving them. Go watch the Wow Box. If you're doing a Wow Box, you can sell that. And that's a way to charge for tickets. So for sure, look at that. Older supporters who do not like technology. Amy, you can do Zoom and walk them through it beforehand. I still think, that's going to be the easiest, I think. More people are using Zoom than you might imagine, is what been my experience. Yep, selling pre-boxed. Yeah, Sarah's weighing in there on some examples of what you can do to sell tickets. Thank you, Sarah. Helping each other. We did a free option watch. Thank you, Don. Angela works for a symphony. And so she's like, well, what's a super low ticket if you're going to provide a live concert? Well, in your case, people might be willing to pay for the live concert. You are a symphony. That's possible. So what I think of as super low is I'm thinking $25. That's what I think super low. But most people are charging nothing for the virtual event. And then the pricing starts if you're actually getting a Wow Box or getting something in return for that. So if there's value in that concert and there's value, then what's super low for you might be a little bit different than what I'm talking about. Emily says everybody's just Zoomed out. Yeah, I've heard that too. I'm not sure I believe it. I think if they see a good Zoom event, these events that I'm working, they've seen Zoomed out, but if they show up, yeah. Emily, here's the thing that, I go back to one of my groups. I was working with a client out of Tennessee, and boy, they were just down on the whole virtual thing. We don't want to do virtual. We do parties. We're in the South, right? They're Southern. They've got their accent on, their Tennessee accent. I don't know how to do a Tennessee accent. I can only do a generic Southern one, but they're like, well, Sherry, we got a Mardi Gras and we like to get together and we're from the South. And this is what they said. They said, we like to tell people they look good to their face and then talk about them behind their back. That's what she said. So I'm like, okay, well, guys, here's the fact. If you're sitting here thinking you have to do a Zoom event, but that's your attitude, please don't do a Zoom event. Don't do a virtual gala. Don't do anything, because that's going to translate to your population. You've got to be excited, folks. Your enthusiasm is what's going to carry it. If you sit out there, if you go out into your audience and to your population and say, oh, well, coronavirus, we've just got to do this. Who wants to participate? But if you go out into your population and say, oh my gosh, I thought I was Zoomed out, but oh, wow, I am really getting excited about some of these ideas that we've got. You are not going to believe it, what we've got planned for this. This is really cool. You've got to build some enthusiasm into it. I learned this 1,000 years ago. My first job, I got transferred to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I was selling a specialty cement. I was the only woman, 150 clients, all these ready mix producers. I'd walk into all of these ready mix and precast concrete places. They'd have all these Penthouse and Playboy calendars all over the wall. This is the environment that I'm working in, right? You know what got me? It wasn't a casting couch, so to speak. It was enthusiasm about this product that they'd never heard of before. I was more than willing to learn and be excited about it. And that's what sold the product. So look, if you are excited about doing a virtual gala, that is going to transfer over to some other people too. So build it up within yourself and put a smile on your face and get out there. But I promise you, there's some really good opportunities with it. Okay, let's keep going here, guys, because we've got about 10 minutes and I want to go through these, what I've learned. Number one, prices of different approaches vary dramatically. I kind of alluded to that before. So you can see a lot of scale depending on your approach. I wouldn't have thought that beforehand, but I've learned it now. Number two, I'm not a fan of watch parties. Not a fan. You get 10 people in a room. It's really an excuse for a party, especially these extroverts who haven't had a chance to party in a while. They want to get together. They want to sit there and talk, and nobody will be watching your broadcast. I have taken screenshots before of these watch parties where everybody's back in the kitchen and nobody's watching your broadcast. So personally, I'm not a fan of them. Number three, some companies are going to say, yes, we can do that very quickly because the economy has tanked, but that doesn't mean they know how to do something. So I'm thinking specifically of meetings that I've participated in with AV companies. Pete's on the line right here. Nick's on the line right here. Nick, I met in a class. Pete, I did not really know, but when I knew that I needed to do something like Zoom in order to make something work, I called a few companies that I've worked with and said, hey, do you guys happen to have Zoom expertise? What's your background with all of this? What do you guys do? I wanted to understand the options. And I learned very quickly that some people will say they have Zoom expertise and they don't know jack. So find somebody you trust. Maybe that's your auctioneer. Maybe that's your event planner. Have them sit on those calls with you. But, people in a bad economy are more likely to say, yeah, we can do that when they really don't know how to do that. Thermometers. Number four, I don't know if I like thermometers. I included that PRS video up there so that you could see what that looks like. I think the time that I like thermometers is when I know we're going to hit the goal. But even then, there is a question in my mind that says, but if we hit the goal, do people stop giving? That's in the back of my mind. They're popular among nonprofits. I hear a lot of people talking about, oh, cool, look at that cool thermometer. I don't know if they're popular among guests. I do think guests like to be acknowledged and thanked for their donation. I'm not sure if it's the thermometer that's the big deal. That's just my thought. Number five, travel still sells. Dining experiences still sell. The key thing on travel is keep those expiration dates long. 3 years is definitely what you need for travel. Number six, I like sound ambiance. I like cheering, and a production company I worked with recently, I feel like bullied one of my clients a little bit into not saying anything. If you listen to the Hope for Henry video, you'll hear people kind of clapping. I would like it even better if there was some light piano music in the background and like really boisterous yelling when we got some donations that came in. But that was better than nothing. But I was at one event and there, we acknowledged the work that these co-chairs had done. And in an in-person event, what would you do? You would say, thank you, and you would cheer for them. But in the studio environment, the PTO president thanked these two women for all the work that they'd done, and it was just silence. And so I kind of, this was during the rehearsal, and I kind of said, well, are we going to clap? Because to me, we should acknowledge this. And the stage manager said, well, no, we got these audio, we don't want this to interfere with the audio. We don't want to do any of that. And they decided not to cheer. But in hindsight, I wish I would have pushed for it. And it takes me back to early in my career where they would be some big production and I'd be on stage and they'd have all these lights, right? They'd have these lights and they'd say, okay, Sherry, you stand right here. And I'll be like, well, wait a second though. I usually like to move around the stage or I'll go out into the audience. No, we're filming this. We need to have nice light on you and make you look good and da, da, da. Well, early in my career, I was bullied into doing that. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm supposed to stand here. Now I'm like, well, you know what, guys, you figure it out. That's your job. My job is to go out there, interact. They're paying me for a certain job. They want me to be interactive. They want me to be engaged. I got to make that happen. And I do that by walking around and going into the crowd. So if the video looks bad, so be it, but that just takes experience and being able to say no to people and know what you need. So I like ambiance in the background. Next, 70%. I was just Monday, I was visiting with an auctioneer and in the Midwest, and they've rolled out some new software, yet another software platform. And he said that he likes to tell his clients to have 70% of the money pre-committed before the virtual gala. And I said, 70%? If I told my clients that 70% of the money needs to be pre-committed, they'd be like, if I have to go get 70%, Sherry, we're not going to do the event. We're done. We're just going to like roll with it. So I found that to be, I think that's a worthy goal. I think that's nice because yeah, sure. You got a lot of money you can talk about coming in, but that just seems, I think you need to stir up the base, to use political terms, since we're in the political season here. Yeah, stir up your base. Tell them, hey, we got this event coming up. We're excited. We've got some special surprises at that $1,000 level or whatever it is. But wow, 70% pre-committed is a lot. If you see something that you like at a gala, write it down and then talk to your trusted expert, whomever that is, your event planner, your production company, if you like them, your auctioneer, and replicate it. For instance, do you want to say the names and the amounts of gifts? Or do you only want to say the names? Because some software will enable you to do that and others won't. So knowing what you want before you go buy the software is important so you don't get ramrodded into something. There's a lot of chatter that goes on amongst auctioneers about some companies who won't change their software, and it creates problems. In one case, there was a piece of software that the only way that you could see the names and the amounts is if you were on the back end of the software and refreshing, right? But if you had 5 donations or 10 donations that came in, it wasn't refreshing fast enough. And so therefore you were caught in this delay and it was problematic. So there's know what you want and then buy the software to match that. And then finally here, was something that I learned, and I don't know, maybe this isn't a big deal, but it felt a little weird to me. It was a studio style two screen solution event that we were doing. And they tend to be people who, the donors are giving, 250 is probably their $250 to $500 are their more bottom levels. Yeah, they go down to like $100 or $50. They'll take whatever donation comes in. But they have a ton of $1,000 donors that come in and a lot of $500 donors. That's kind of where they sit. And these names are popping up on the screen, and my co-host and I are, wow, look at this. Another donation comes in. And, just something that I did that I'm like, I don't know how I feel about that. So somebody donated $10, 10. Now, for all I know, it could have been a student. I don't know. But, we're rolling along with these big numbers. And then I'm like, and Jonathan gave $10. And I'm like, oh, did that sound weird on the studio environment? So one of the things that I've taught myself is like, okay, if kudos to him, the guy stepped up and gave. I'm not discounting that at all. But maybe he forgot a zero too. Maybe he meant to give $100. I don't know. But I'm wondering if I should pause a bit longer, like watch the name and then see what comes up right behind it. Because I want to make sure I'm thanking my big donors. Not that I don't want to thank my $10 donors, but it was just kind of like one of these things that I felt a little awkward as I was saying it. So I don't know. We'll see. It was hopefully a one-off. Okay, let's look at some of these questions. As a reminder, if you want to participate in a full training, I just put the link over there in the chat. End of this month, 90 minutes one day, 90 minutes the second day. The following week, we're going to do a Q&A. It's going to teach you specifically about Zoom type events. But even in the past, when I've run this course, people who were doing 2-screen solutions participated and felt that they got value out of it. $189, but that's the link to sign up if you want to get in on the full blown training. I've got some good reviews as well. You can read the reviews over on the website to see what people thought about that. Christine says, I watched the WowBox video. And a previous webinar. Our little school bought some Christmas cookie boxes to distribute to people. That's a neat idea. Who signed up to attend our live auction on Zoom. We distributed them 2 days before the event. It was a huge hit. I like that. Yeah, nice. If one's organization did a virtual gala last spring, how do you make it substantially different this spring? Well, Maria, I don't know what you did last spring, but there's been a lot of evolution in virtual galas since then. So you could up the ante in your wow box. You could, did you do wine tastings? Did you do trivia? You could change the format of the virtual gala. You can change items. Maybe you offer a live auction when you didn't in the past. So all of that. Lorna, if you want Wowbox ideas, I have got a 1-hour webinar on that. Look at the videos in the conversation series. We have a choice of showing bid number or name in text to bid. Okay, good for you, Judy. You can decide what you want. Any groups planning live in-person events yet for 2021? I have not seen that yet, Jennifer. No. Although a lot of people, I was just visiting with a client in Boston. She hadn't sent back her agreement. And I said, are you guys like, everybody seems to be holding out and playing the odds and they don't want to commit. And she says, yeah, that's what we're doing. we're trying to see what's going to happen here before we sign on the dotted line. Sarah's talking about pre-selling boxed meals. Yes, that's one of my groups at Wichita, Kansas. I worked with a museum out there and they had a red carpet drive-through. People showed up that night. They handed them their food. They drove back home and then they watched the gala online. Maria says, where do we learn about the Wow Box? The same place that you go to watch the videos for this call, scroll down. I think it was conversation 4. Maybe, where I talked about wow boxes. You'll see it in there. Other questions, comments? Judy is talking about in-person events, I think. She's in Montgomery County, Maryland, which is a suburb of the DC area. And she said their event planner says things are not looking good for in-person events. Yeah, no, I don't think we're going to do any in-person events in the spring. We might start doing some hybrids in the fall. That's my take. Sarah said something about an open environment. Now, I have got one client right now who is considering in late spring, early summer, doing an in-person event outdoors under a tent. So if, the issue here is weather, is can you deal with the weather? If you can, that's, if it's in your favor, then that might be a way to play it safe. Smaller numbers, outside, warm weather. Okay, Lisa May, where do you think fundraising galas are headed next year? I think in the spring, it's pretty much what we've been seeing all in 2020 as far as a virtual gala goes. I think we're going to see more hybrid events come out in the fall. Again, I'm not sure whether they'll be as successful or a way to be as great for my online audience as my in-person audience, but I do think that we're going to see more hybrid events headed that way. I think that virtual events will not die when we are in a non-coronavirus times, but I think they'll be moved towards different uses. So it might be a way to do a gala, for instance, for young professionals. There might be 2 events that happen in the course of the year, a very high-end event for a certain type of donor, and then you've got your virtual gala that would be for maybe that's your award ceremony. That could even be something like that, award ceremony, or it could be for your young professionals, or it could be for group donors that are not above a certain level. It might be that. That's where I think it'll be when we go back to non-coronavirus times. I don't think they're going to go away. I just think that they'll be used in a different way. But for this year, I think it's going to be virtual and then maybe hybrid in the fall, or virtual in the fall too. All right, 2 new messages. All right, Laurel's saying she's gonna log off. No worries. It was helpful. Very good. Useful webinar. Very good. Fishing derby or turkey shoot. Oh, wow. Tammy, great ideas. Way out of my scope. I'm 8 miles deep on auctions only, so I can't help you with those kinds of suggestions. Using the example you had of the auction that offered a movie afterwards, do you know how they did that? Yeah, Holly. It was kind of a unique one-off within their donor base, their audience. They had somebody who works for a PR company who does some work with movies. So when this is an industry of which I know nothing about, but apparently when movies go into major markets, there's a lot of promotion that goes with that movie. Maybe a budget's been set aside to promote it. And so this particular company had the rights for that movie to promote it into the DC area. Well, because the movie theaters were closed, they've got this movie, it's going to be released. So they were able to work with this PR company to have the release be just for the guests of this gala. And so you got to watch it. And I don't know if it was a week before everybody else in Washington, D.C. or a week before it was released. I don't know all of the back end side of that, but that was the connection. It was a PR company who had the promotion rights for the D.C. area. Okay, Amy's going to watch videos. Yeah, guys. I would really say take a look at the videos in there. Not only have we talked through some of them here, but I provide notes in each of those videos that will show you where what I'm trying to get across as you watch it. So you'll be able to get a sense of learning from each of these events just by watching the videos too. Okay, I am going to tie this up. I've got to go get some photos. I need new shots for like LinkedIn profile and things like that. I don't want to get so one of these people that you look at the photo and you're like, who is that? I met this girl. She doesn't look anything like that. So I'm going to do that at 3:00 down in Old Town. If you see me at the Mormon Temple, it's not the Mormon Temple, the Masonic Temple down there, you know what I'm doing. I'm getting my photos taken. Sarah's last one here today. Sarah says, if you have watch parties in someone's home, what's the best way to optimize the experience? Everyone a laptop seems bad. Sarah, the way that those have been handled, and again, I'm not a fan, but the way that those have been handled is that people who have big screen TVs will manage it. So they're hooking it up to their big screen TV and people are watching. In fact, one of the groups that I saw, they had like an outdoor pavilion, an outdoor area, living area, and their television was out there. So they invited everybody outside and they watched on this big screen TV outside. You know what I envision? Anybody who's really into sports and has their whole like sports area or a movie theater decked out, that they're probably a good person to ask. They'll figure that piece out for you. Right. Dietz is saying about movies. Dietz, they had the right to show the movie. I don't think people are talking here about just randomly showing movies, but in this case, they did get the rights to show the movie. I'm an independent filmmaker. We started offering virtual screenings as fundraisers. It went very well. Our first event raised $10,000 with a scholarship. Okay. Thank you, JR. You would know more about this than I would. Krista's asking about, virtual events are happening all day long, every day of the week. There is no right or wrong way. If you've never done a Wednesday night event and you want to try it, do it now. This is the year. Last year and this year are the years to experiment. You can't do it wrong. You really can't. Experiment and see what works for you and blame it on coronavirus if you aren't happy with the result. Okay, I'm good. I'm going to sign out here. Thank you so much for participating. Happy New Year to everybody. And we will catch you with the next one. We'll see whether I'll do another conversation or not. It just kind of depends on how the industry goes. Okay. Bye.